Everybody has been talking about what if Paddy Pimblett wins the interim title this weekend at UFC 324, but the real question here, man, is what if Justin Gaethje beats Paddy Pimblett? Let's get into it. The 6-week UFC break is finally over, man, and I'm just happy to be here. And let's be real, Justin Gaethje has the perfect opportunity to completely ruin the UFC's plans for 2026. It's very clear what the UFC want to do. They are hoping that Paddy Pimblett can beat an old washed up version of Justin Gaethje, even though I don't think that's true. And then they can make one of the only super fights they have left with Ilia versus Paddy. But if Justin Gaethje wins this weekend, this ruins everything, and this is not the timeline that the UFC wants. Not because Justin Gaethje is bad for the sport whatsoever, but because a win here for Justin Gaethje would completely stall the UFC's plans, even change the narrative, ruins this storyline that the UFC has been building up with Paddy and Ilia, and completely affects not only the lightweight division, but also the welterweight division. Because look at it like this, man, a Paddy Pimblett win here would mean massive momentum for UFC numbers and a very clear star building moment, where a Justin Gaethje win here creates complete uncertainty in this division, and like I said before, man, delays momentum that the UFC has been building towards. Which brings me into my first theme, Ilia Topuria's worst case scenario. A couple of weeks ago, Ilia Topuria said something very interesting, was that if Justin Gaethje was to win at UFC 324 and become the interim lightweight champion, that the UFC would have other plans for Ilia. This essentially confirms what we are all thinking, that if Justin Gaethje beats Paddy Pimblett, Ilia more than likely will not want to stick around at the lightweight division. We all know the true fight that Ilia has been chasing, which is the Islam Makhachev fight at welterweight to become the first ever triple champion, and the only thing keeping Ilia at lightweight is, let's be real, it's that Paddy Pimblett fight, because aside from Islam Makhachev, that fight is the only fight that will make Ilia Topuria the most money. I really don't think that Ilia saying this was just coincidence or just rumors. I think he genuinely meant something here, that the UFC has laid out a very clear plan for Ilia. So if Justin wins here, Ilia will have two very obvious options. Option A is to stick around and fight an old Justin Gaethje that, let's be real, man, is a very easy matchup for a guy like Ilia Topuria. Justin Gaethje is not a wrestler, he's not a heavy grappler, he doesn't have a lot of distance or range that he can use against Ilia, so realistically he would have to stand in boxing range and trade, and also try to work those leg kicks, and let's be real, man, that's exactly what Ilia Topuria's bread and butter is. But this would be the lowest upside for Ilia Topuria, because fighting Justin Gaethje would not mean anything close to the legacy that fighting Islam Makhachev for a third belt would. Where option B for Ilia Topuria is to delay or just stall or really ultimately move up to welterweight. I really could see Ilia Topuria doing this if Justin wins. He'll say that he needs more time off because of the issues in his personal life, and eventually they'll just promote Justin Gaethje to undisputed, and then Ilia Topuria will not even want to fight at lightweight anymore. Because something I spoke about in my last video is Ilia Topuria's playbook here is to speedrun GOAT status, and the only way to do that is by beating legends and becoming the champion and then defending your title at least once. Whereas if the UFC decide to strip Ilia and promote Justin Gaethje to undisputed, I can guarantee you Ilia Topuria will not come back to fight Justin Gaethje to get his belt back. Re-winning the belt against a guy like Justin Gaethje would not mean anything to Ilia Topuria's legacy unless it was a title defense. So overall, I just think that Justin Gaethje doesn't advance Ilia Topuria's legacy. If anything, he kind of freezes it. Which brings me into my next theme, the expiring champion. This is something that no one is talking about for whatever reason, and it's such an obvious fact, is that Justin Gaethje is getting up there in age. I think he's 37 or 38 years old. This is not the prime age of a fighter, and we've clearly seen a little bit of decline in Justin Gaethje, even though he did beat Rafael Fiziev. I just think since that Dustin Poirier fight, he has not looked like the same fighter. It's very clear that he plans to retire soon. All of his interviews this week, there's at least one quote about him talking about retirement, and I get it. He's being asked about it. He's not voluntarily, admitting that he's going to retire. But earlier today, he said that he will 100% be done by 2027. So that means even if he wins here and beats Paddy Pimblett, becomes the interim champ, we are looking at maximum 3 more fights. So this is zero long-term division planning. This is not what the UFC wants. They don't want an older guy to win the belt because it's more likely that he's going to just end up retiring soon. And if we know one thing about the UFC, they want to create momentum. They want to create stars like Paddy Pimblett, a guy that is young, that could have a long-term reign in this division. So if Justin Gaethje wins, the UFC gets a new champion that has an expiration date that is coming up very soon. Where, like I said with Paddy Pimblett, man, he's a much younger guy, a much fresher guy, a fighter that hasn't taken anywhere close to the amount of damage as Justin Gaethje, and not to mention, He talks a lot of trash, he sells his fights, where Justin Gaethje, his violence and the way that he fights sells his fights, but the UFC wants something a little bit more these days. And we know the UFC does not like to plan their future around a guy that is already planning his exit. Which brings me into my next theme, merit is dying. What I mean by this is that it's very clear these days the UFC does not give title shots based on merit. If that was the case, Arman Tsarukyan would be fighting for this title. And out of Paddy and Justin, I would say that Paddy deserves to be fighting for the interim title a lot more than Justin Gaethje does, because he's on an actual win streak, where Justin Gaethje is coming off of one win and getting an interim title shot. Even though I know Paddy Pimblett's past opponents have been extremely sus, it still warrants more of a title shot considering just how much hype he has and the fact that he's undefeated in the UFC. But Arman Tsarukyan has to be in this equation somehow. I would have much rather to have seen Paddy versus Arman Tsarukyan. It just makes so much more sense. So no matter who the winner here is, but especially if it is Justin Gaethje, I don't know, man, this will just leave a bad taste in my mouth, because this guy was literally threatening to retire if he did not get a title shot. So the fact that this guy could potentially be the champ, and the only reason he got a title shot off of one win was because he was threatening to retire.
They owe me a championship fight. I'm 3-1. They came to my house, begged me to fight Max Holloway on UFC 300. I consider it an exhibition fight. I don't mean that the loss is not on my record. And then Oliveira's 2-2 in his last fight. Already has a loss to Makhachev, and they bring a brand new guy in, and I get, again. So I'm not going to fight any of these motherfuckers for fun unless they pay me so much more money.
I don't know, bro. I just don't like that. But my thing here is, man, is I genuinely see Justin Gaethje winning this fight. Not only just because I think that he is the better fighter, but also because Paddy Pimblett has not fought anyone on Justin Gaethje's level. Like, just compare the resumes. I get Paddy's a lot younger and has a lot more ways to win this fight, but I just think the experience is going to show in this fight massively. Which brings me into my next theme, why the UFC needs Justin Gaethje to lose. Like I said, man, the UFC doesn't want Justin Gaethje to become an interim champion because he completely blocks that Ilia versus Paddy fight they've built up, delays this massive super fight, and let's be real, man, he has limited promotional upside. As exciting as he is, he doesn't talk trash in the lead ups to his fights, where Paddy Pimblett is very clearly the more marketable guy. And I'm a fan of Justin Gaethje, but you can respect the fighter while admitting that they aren't the best outcome for the UFC here. I genuinely think if this fight wasn't against Paddy Pimblett, they would not have even made this an interim title fight. If it was Arman versus Justin, it would have just been a #1 contender fight, and I think that honestly probably was the plan, and they actually wanted to make Ilia versus Paddy for the undisputed title, but because Ilia had to take time off, this is the next best option. Which brings me into my next theme, the interim title nightmare. Like I said, man, if Justin Gaethje wins here, Ilia Topuria will likely move up or just completely stall this division, because he doesn't want to fight Justin Gaethje, not because he's scared of him, but because it doesn't really do much for his legacy. But at the same time, the UFC will avoid stripping Ilia until they absolutely have to. So the result that we're left with, an interim champion defending his belt. If Justin Gaethje wins here, we will likely see Justin Gaethje defend his belt against Arman Tsarukyan, another Tom Aspinall situation, but we know Justin will do this because he even talked about how even as an interim champion, he gets paid the same as a normal champion. But he has a very clear short shell life, and also he has no clear path of becoming, this dominant UFC champion. Which brings me into my next theme, why Justin Gaethje will actually win this fight. Paddy has just simply never faced a guy like Justin Gaethje, someone that pressures, kicks, and just forces those panic exchanges like Justin Gaethje does. Man, that's his bread and butter. Not to mention, man, Paddy Pimblett's defense is extremely sus, and I think his chin is there on a platter for Justin Gaethje to absolutely check hook. But then again, so is Justin Gaethje's, man. We saw him get knocked out by Max Holloway, a guy that isn't really known for his knockout power, and Paddy Pimblett isn't really known for his KO power either, but I do think that at this stage in Justin's career, he does have a bit of a sus chin. Like I said before, man, Paddy does have more ways to win, especially with the grappling, but I just think Justin Gaethje, his leg kicks will be way too much for Paddy, and once he limits Paddy's movement, I think he'll be really compromised. And we've seen this story before, man, where the UFC will absolutely rush a guy way too quickly. We saw this with Darren Till, and then he gets a title shot without having to go through the death row of the division, and he's just not ready, man, and we see this skill gap once the bell starts. Because yes, Paddy Pimblett has never been knocked out in the UFC, but he hasn't fought any guys anywhere close to the level that Justin Gaethje has fought. Which brings me into my next theme, why Justin Gaethje won't retire. Even if Justin Gaethje loses here, I truly don't believe he will retire, even though he said he will retire if he loses this fight. I just think, man, with the White House coming up, even if Justin were to lose, he will 100% want to be on that card, and I believe that this would be the perfect retirement for Justin Gaethje. Like I said, man, I think this is best case scenario for the UFC to see Justin Gaethje lose, because not only will he not retire, but then they'll also get him on the White House card, which is the best place to put a fighter like Justin Gaethje, who has pretty much an all-American fan base. So from this fight, they could get a Paddy Pimblett versus Ilia Topuria undisputed title fight, and also a Justin Gaethje fight somewhere on the main card or prelims of a White House card. So it's really like the UFC has completely backed Justin Gaethje in a corner here, where they are really betting on him losing, but they know even if he loses, he's going to stick around for at least one more fight. But like I said, man, I think Justin Gaethje is going to beat Paddy Pimblett this weekend at UFC 324. But at the same time, this is going to create a big stall in momentum for the UFC and will really block one of their only super fights left in this company. And I truly do believe we're going to enter a very weird phase in the lightweight division where Ilia Topuria will stall and Justin Gaethje will be forced to defend his interim title. But yeah, man, those are my thoughts. Let me know what you guys think. Make sure you guys do drop a like on this video. Make sure to subscribe as well, man. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.